I just forgot to put a little bit of music in the background. I do like a little music in the background, but there you go. I have started now. Hello. It is the 13th of July. It's a Thursday, 2023. And I'm reading out of Life as Carola. She is, Carola was born over 500 years ago in 1510 in Italy, pre-Renaissance. And this book is written by Joan Grant, who is a writer of her own far memories. And this was her second book she published. She was alive between 1907 and 1989. And as I said, she was a writer of her own far memories. Carola is the illegitimate daughter of Lord Griffin and was banished from the castle already as a child with her mother. Her mother was killed. She is now late teens, early 20, and she has gone into a convent. It's chapter 19, and it's the second part, and it is entitled Nativity. In the second week in September, Francesca went into the penitential cell. My fear of her being discovered had increased during the last weeks, for I felt that several of the nuns were watching us with suspicion. Sometimes I thought she would betray herself by the intense inward joy that shone in her eyes, but if the others noticed, they must have thought it a sign of some heavenly beatitude. We were careful never to speak to each other, except when we were alone, and I found it increasingly more difficult to escape from supervision. Every day I managed to avoid their vigilance long enough to reach the grating into her cell and find how she was. The first 5 days she felt no change, and we began to fear that she had gone into the cell too soon, but on the 6th day she told me that her birth pangs had begun. I lay on the ground and saw her smiling up at me through the twilight. She walked up and down, up and down. Sometimes when the pain gripped her yet more fiercely, she leaned against the wall for support, but she did not groan or cry out. I asked her, "Francesca, is the pain very terrible? If I could only be there with you to help you." "It is a strange pain. I never knew we were all born by such pain, but it is easy to bear, for through it I shall see my child, my son. I know that he will be a son." "You remember all I told you? You must tie the cord with thread or he will bleed. You've got the rags and the shift I stole from the laundry to wrap him up in?" Yes, you must not be afraid of me, afraid for me. Many women must have had to bear their child alone, and I have love for a midwife, and she is more skilled than any wise woman. I'll come back to you tonight. Be sure they do not see you, or you will betray us both. Do not be afraid for me, Carola. I'm strong, and there is so much joy in my heart that there is no room for fear. I longed to stay with her, but I dared not, for I heard the bell and had to hurry away to fill my place in the long line of kneeling figures. All the next day I could not go to her. It seemed that the nuns had deliberately made me work where they could watch me all the time. In the morning I had to polish the candlesticks in the chapel. 2 other novices were working with me, and a nun sat watching us, the wooden beads of her rosary slipping through her fingers as she mumbled her endless string of prayers. In the afternoon I was sent to the laundry. The irons were heated on a grid over a charcoal brazier. It was difficult to get them to the right heat, and I was afraid that I should scorch something, because I had done this before and spent 2 days in my cell as a punishment. I worked as quickly as I could, but before I had finished it was time for us to be locked in. I prayed very hard that I should be able to go to Francesca when I slept and bring back news of her, but I was awake most of the night and remembered only shadowy fragments of dreams that had no meaning. The following morning I was sent with the novices that were weeding between the rows of young cherry trees in the orchard. The nun who was watching us was Margherita, the one from whom I had stolen the keys to help Beatrice escape. She sat down with her back against the tree, fanning herself with a rhubarb leaf to keep off the flies. At last she went to sleep. I dared not go out by the gate, for she was near it, and I was afraid that I might waken her. So I climbed over the inner wall at a place hidden from the others by an old pear tree. I was not sure whether anyone saw me, but I was too anxious to care. I crept along in the shadow of the wall and managed to reach the grating without being seen. I listened before I lifted it up, but I could hear nothing. For a moment I thought Francesca must be dead. I called her name very softly. Still I heard nothing. I lay on the ground staring down into the darkness, and as my eyes got accustomed to the gloom, I saw that she was not dead, but sleeping, with her child in her arms. It was the first time I had ever seen her without her habit. She wore only her shift, and the torn coverlet had slipped aside. The baby's dark hair was pillowed on the curve of her full breast, and I thought that anyone who could condemn her would have condemned Mary when she lay in the straw with the young Jesus. I whispered her name again, and she opened her eyes. When she stirred, the baby began to cry, but she gave him to suck and quietened him. She told me to let down the rope of my girdle, for she had stained clothes that I must bury. I buried the bundle in the soft mould under some bushes near where I had hidden the basket, and covered the newly turned earth deeply with rotten leaves. I dared not stay any longer in case Margarita woke up and missed me, but before I left her, Francesca held the baby up in her arms, and I managed to stretch down far enough to touch its soft head with my fingers. I said, "Francesca, don't come back here anymore. Stay with your baby. Don't leave him alone. Forget your vows. They were not made to God, but only to priests. And in priests such as we know, there is no godliness." She looked down at the child. "God has sent this soul into my keeping. Carola, do you think it is a sign that I should cherish him above all things? Perhaps the Mother of God would have compassion for me. She cannot have forgotten the little Jesus in the Christ. Your child was born of love, and all love comes from God. He had sent you this child to cherish. Love is greater than vows, and courage is greater than fear. Escape, Francesca. You could bring heaven to Guillermo if you came to him with your son. You could take ship for another country and live out your lives in rich contentment. If you leave your son, he will cry in the arms of a foster mother, though she were very kind and tender to him, for it is you that he wants. Perhaps in the past he gave you his protection, now you must give him yours. He seems more real than all my vows. It is not my soul I fear, but theirs. There is no fear in God. That is what we have forgotten. To love another is to love God and to feel his compassion. Tonight you will leave the convent with your child. Will you be strong enough to walk? For him I could walk anywhere, have any strength. Don't come back any more, Francesca. Stay in the world. While love protects you, you go in fear of no. While love protects you, you go in no fear of hell. When I had to leave her, I was not sure whether she would have the courage to escape into the world. The days passed and I never saw her again. Though I was lonely for her, I rejoiced, for I thought of her with Guillermo and her son. Well, that was a lovely chapter. I stop this here and upload it.